Hello, everyone. This is our chapter one introduction lecture. There's no slides for this, and to be honest, there's not much I'm going to say. This is going to be a rather, the chapter itself is only 8 pages, and so I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. I wasn't even sure if I was going to make it like a just an audio file or what would I do? Am I going to make slides? I really don't want to. So I don't know. I just, as an economist, my default is always to go to the Fred site, since the Fred site's for me entertaining. Um, but um, so let's just talk about it. So if you've read chapter one, again, it's a rather short chapter. Um, let's just talk about what we are doing in this course in general. This again is intermediate microeconomics. Now, the reason why I even had mentioned earlier, um, understanding the material in this class is not only critical to doing well in the class, but it also is sort of I would argue, probably the most important class in your economics curriculum as a major. That if you pass the class and you just barely pass it, maybe being an economist is not the, long term graduate school goal for you because, at least in my experience, even as a macro person myself, the first 2 years was dominated certainly by micro theory. Um, yes, we have both microeconomics and macroeconomics in the discipline as a whole, but microeconomics is certainly at the graduate level is the primary field for everyone. Now, the reason why that is it's because it's the oldest, it's the most homogeneous in terms of theory. It's grounded in um, linear algebra and calculus, and so it can be taught consistently without much drama. And it makes the discipline of economics seem more scientific. What we are doing in this class is basically scaling up what you did in Econ 130, Principles of Micro. And what we're doing, especially in this chapter, is just reminding us of some of the basics things that a microeconomist does. So, to review for us, and you'll see this in the division of the course material itself, um, microeconomics is going to focus on micro units, meaning it's going to focus on consumers and it's going to focus on industrial organization. We're going to talk more about industrial organization and the production process than we will about consumer behavior. Um, and that's, it's just part of um, it's part of the, how do I want to say this? It's just, what do a microeconomist know more about? They know more about the production process, and people care more about the production process than why consumers do what they do. Why consumers do what they do starts to get into the territory where microeconomists aren't as certain about things, because how do you measure people's happiness or satisfaction? How do you measure why people do certain things without involving other things like marketing and whatnot that go beyond what economists do? The production process, on the other hand, and pricing behavior is more scientific, can be mathematized and modeled more closely. And so that's largely why microeconomists focus on that a great deal more. We obviously are going to focus exclusively in this course on prices and markets. This is not a Marxist course. This is not a course to describe how central planning happens. I would not be your person to do that. Not only that, but also I think it's a bit rare to find an economist who's trained to do that kind of thing. um, even though I am a macroeconomist, my dissertation itself was in microeconomic field, and specifically, I was looking at market failures for the public good. Public good being a good where there's either a characteristic of non-excludability, or there's a characteristic of either non-excludability, or some form of non-satiation. What does that mean? It basically means that how do you pay for goods like the fire department, right? There is no economic concept that says that a fire department has to be paid for by the city or the county, or by the public in general. But that is the way it typically happens. And the reason why it happens is because it's incredibly difficult to exclude some from enjoying it, the protection of fire service, without impinging on others. And it's hard to get people to pay for it voluntarily. In my case, I looked at the market failure of and I know it sounds a little weird here, but the publication of research. And the reason why I looked at that is, we, as just academics in general, publish research in journals, but the journals are not paid for by the public. In this case, they're just paid for by libraries, academic libraries. And the problem with that, by relying on the private market for the publication of academic research, is that not enough academic research is published. And so you start to think about, what do the pricing models look like that would either, in this case, allow for more fire protection, or in my case, allow you to look for more publication of academic research. That market failure. Microeconomists, a proper field for them of study would be market failures, because they spend their time on pricing behavior and on the structure of markets. Microeconomists as well are looking at economic models, and you've been exposed to some models already, even in your 100 level classes. These would be things like looking at the demand and supply model, looking at production possibilities. You've probably been exposed to some Keynesian models in terms of aggregate demand, aggregate supply. In our case, models become a bit more important because, again, we're focused on markets. In our review here, we will do supply and demand, but then we're going to kind of quickly go into indifference curve mapping, the production process, and start to graph and calculate out the way in which different industrial organizations occur: perfect competition, monopolies, monopsonies, and oligopolies. And we won't spend a great deal of time on this specifically, but I think it bears mentioning. And again, this is a rather short chapter, so it's not like we would. They don't spend a lot of time on it either. But there's this idea of a difference existing between positive and normative economics, where positive economics are statements of fact and normative economics are statements of opinion, which can or cannot be, may not be backed up by fact. So this would be issues like, for instance, I could make a statement that increasing the minimum wage, not as a micro statement, but let's say I was a macroeconomist, increasing the minimum wage causes unemployment, right? And I could look at the data and I could either find that that statement is true or false, right? So I could set up a measure, I could set up some sort of controlled experiment where I could see if whether increasing the minimum wage actually increased unemployment or not. Right? And we can certainly graph it out and we can see that it exists, at least in theory. But what if I said as an alternative that the minimum wage is not a livable wage and that it's not possible for a family to afford what we think humans should be able to afford on the minimum wage, right? and by extension that the minimum wage should be higher. That's going into a normative statement, right? This is me as, I'm not saying this personally, but right, it would be someone like me saying, Scheiding says that the minimum wage should be higher so that a person who's working can raise their family and feed them, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, Me personally, I tend to focus on the positive economic statements. I don't know why I do. I mean, I have opinions. It's not that I'm a robot and don't have any opinions about things. It's just that uh, I don't like to impose it on others. And my views will come out on things, but I'm not one to push my point of view. If we look at something like the work that economists at UHERO are doing, it's largely positive economic statements, right? And so we can look at things like, looking at what happens when the sea level rises without getting into climate change, right? Here, we could look at, in this case here, we could look at how poverty, housing, and food insecurity, how that's shaping the public health. Um, and so you can kind of see um, these kinds of discussions here um, largely keep to positive economic statements. Why does UHERO do that? Well, it's in the economics department here, and it's largely related to, we're a publicly funded institution, so we don't want to be, advocating for certain things. But the way that that's different is, I don't remember what the place is called. There's an organization here in Hawaii, Hawaii Appleseed, which is more conservative leaning, and nothing against it, right? I mean, there's 2 points of views here, but here, if we look at something like, I haven't really looked at this. We could look at things where there's a bit more of a particular point of view expressed about certain things. And again, it's not so if we're looking at certainly at taxes and budget, a lot of it is going to be about reducing taxation as a way for individuals to be able to afford more. In this case, mothers who are working, if they get a child tax credit, then they could continue to work rather than relying on public assistance. Again, the Appleseed Foundation will just kind of focus on a bit more of a point of view, I guess is the best way to put it. Nothing wrong with it. And they certainly would have economists that are expressing their point of views and working towards these things. But at the same time, it is a point of view. Again, what are we going to do in this class? I'm not going to focus too much on. I'm not going to focus too much on expressing a point of view. I'm going to fix my attention largely on positive economic statements. As I'm looking over the chapter here, I don't think I've really missed too much. Again, that you wouldn't have been able to read in the chapter. Economists build models. We test these models by making hypotheses with positive economic statements that we test again, and it doesn't stop people from having particular points of views that they could express as normative statements. But those normative statements, because they're not testable, they're generally not going to be the focus of this textbook. They're not going to be the focus of this class. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do those things. It's just that I don't want you to be disappointed when you don't find those things. My job here in this class, especially in this class, is going to be teaching you the theory and focusing on the positive economic statements and the economic models. Okay, that's chapter 1, rather short, no slides. So there we go.